It's the week ending Saturday the 30th of July, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen the Tory leadership debate being halted due to the presenter Kate McCann fainting, Eurovision organisers deciding the UK should host next year's contest on behalf of Ukraine, and England beating Sweden 4-0 to reach the final of the Women's Euros. But we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news, not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Arion McNicoll. Let's unwrap the week. And as Olly is still on holiday, I'm here for one more week. And joining me today from the week's digital team, it's Kate Samuelson. Live from Hong Kong, it's host of Integrate That podcast, Abdulwahab Tahhan. Plus, it's all go here at The Week Unwrapped as we've got another newbie. It's book reviews editor for the International Affairs Journal, Mariana Vieri. Now, Mariana, welcome. And as is tradition on this show, can you tell us one thing that we wouldn't be able to find out if we went online and Googled you?
Hi, sure. This sounds like a great tradition for welcoming people. I'm not entirely sure if I feel welcomed at this point, but one thing that you can find out about me if you Googled is that I'm terrified of spiders. And to this point, that's not as surprising, but I'm so terrified that I cannot kill them, which means on different occasions, ever since I've moved to the UK, I've had different neighbors. I've convinced them / recruited them to come into my house and kill the spiders for me. So if you ever need a head of a general for an army, I feel like I'd be very persuasive, providing the enemy is a spider.
I always think of arachnophobia as being a really healthy phobia, particularly because I come from Australia. This is a place where spiders are genuinely trying to kill you. So, I'm not sure that would be the place for you if you're thinking about your next destination.
Absolutely not. I feel like they could kill me just by staring at me from a wall. No doubt.
That's something people definitely need to know about you. I'm going straight to your Wikipedia page to update it. But just before I do, Abdul, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Can one line make a city?
A revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The line's communities are organized in 3 dimensions within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. Travel end to end in 20 minutes. Designed by world-leading architects, the line is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade.
What is the line? An advert from Neom. Abdul, what is the line? And for that matter, what is Neom?
So Neom is a city that Saudi Arabia is building in the desert, which is supposed to be kind of the new Silicon Valley to attract all the entrepreneurs in Saudi Arabia, in the Arabic countries, and from around the world. And the line is the new city that has been just announced. So the city, as you heard, is going to be 170 kilometers long, but it's made of a line. The line is going to be 200 meters wide, 170 kilometer long, and 500 meters high. And in it, it's supposed to host 9 million people. There's no transport on this. There's no cars on this city. So, and people will be able to move from end to end within 20 minutes because of the high-speed train that's going to be installed.
What's the reason to build this thing, which looks absolutely wild? I mean, I was just riveted by it as soon as I saw it. I mean, why is this being built and how much is it likely to cost?
Well, this is being built in order to enhance Saudi Arabia's image and the move away from focusing on oil, and because Saudi Arabia has, recognizes that oil is going to disappear, right? They only have a finite amount of sources. So they want to move away from that. And for that, they're focusing on tourism and focusing on entrepreneurship skills. And they are kind of leading the Arabic region with innovations and entrepreneur. They're running a lot of entrepreneurship workshops for their people. And they want to attract all the minds around the world in order to kind of, make it the new Silicon Valley, have a lot of new innovative applications and inventions.
Yeah, so Mariana, this idea of bringing minds from all over the country, the best minds, is this city going to be something like Dubai where foreigners can come and live, but under a different set of rules, such as drinking alcohol, for example? Is it going to be that kind of a construction?
That is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it because I haven't even seen the answer to it myself, and I find that there's all these visuals, important information and data about how they're going to construct the city, but there's very little about the humans. And actually, the first line that I talk about is it's going to put the humans first, but it doesn't really talk about which humans and how will access look like and what kinds of decision making and governance mechanisms it's going to have. I mean, I come from Portugal. Portugal has, just for perspective, 10 million people. So it's about the population of the city. And we've had about 8 centuries to come to agreement about everything. And obviously we haven't. And sort of conflict is something to be expected when you're living in society. And there's very little to be said about who gets access to the city, what kind of rules / government procedures and decision making, but also conflict resolution mechanisms will be in place. So it's very much a big question mark at this point.
Yeah, it really does seem to put like robots and AI ahead of, humans and nature, although nature does come into it. And Kate, this is all part of a broader set of what Saudi Arabia calls their giga projects. What are the giga projects?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this project falls under a kind of collective of projects which are so large that they've become known as the Giga Projects. And that's all part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, which is this kind of framework and brainchild of the Crown Prince, MBS. And as well as the line which Abdul's been speaking about, these projects include things like Amala, which is a 1,460 square mile resort, which is being developed along the northwestern Red Sea coastline of Saudi Arabia. And it's a kind of luxury tourism destination. And there's also something called Qiddiya. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's an entertainment-based city on the outskirts of Riyadh, which has been described as the kingdom's answer to Disneyland because its plans include things like high-end theme parks and motorsport facilities and a safari area. And according to The Guardian, authorities are hoping that the park will draw in foreign investment and attract as many as 17 million visitors by 2030, which is not that far off.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like pure science fiction on one level, but the project is actually quite well progressed, isn't it, Abdul? And, one of the things that I've been wondering is whether considerations for the environmental impact of what building a huge, hundreds of kilometers long city that is mirrored, what will the impact actually be of a city like that?
Well, to be honest with you, according to the advertisement, again, this is something that we only know from the advertisement and from the official press release, right? It's the claims that it's going to be run 100% on renewable energy. 95% of the land will be preserved for nature. What does that mean? I'm not really sure. And the footprint compared to other cities is going to be only like 2% of what other cities are making. Environmentally speaking, it looks great on paper. Now, is that going to be the real figures? We don't really know. Are there any concerns, not only environmental, but on the human rights issues, which we all know, we had Saudi Arabia has a record of human rights, bad record of human rights issues. Is that going to play a role here? I'm sure it will, because this is going to be built in the desert. So we know a lot of workers have died in Qatar and other places building big projects. So how many poor people are going to die? Are they going to be reported? Are they going to be compensated? Are their family going to be compensated? Is there going to be any, assurance that these things will not happen? These are the concerns for now. But on paper, it looks great. Environmentally speaking, it looks good. Is that going to happen? We have to wait until 2030 if they deliver on their promises to deliver it by 2030.
We saw Joe Biden in Saudi Arabia last week, despite having previously promised to make Saudi a pariah state. Is this the moment where Saudi is really being brought back in from the cold?
We could argue back and forth what's been the cold and what's been the hot parts of the US and Saudi Arabia relationship. But I feel like we're looking so far as 2030, even though it's 8 years from now, you can argue very easily looking at what the literature is writing about. And we just had a book reviewed on how MBS is looking like the Icarus of Saudi Arabia, and that he might just burn his wings a little bit too soon with a track record of how he's turned Saudi Arabia into one of the most tyrannical state in the region. It's now ruled by fear rather than consensus. He's not had a particularly good track record with dealing with the other members of the family, the royal household, which means there's a lot more tensions there to deal with. And also at home, he has detained hundreds of critics, and regionally, he's destroyed Yemen. He's fragmented the Gulf Cooperation Council. And sort of the way that all these dynamics pull together, it's very hard to tell whether he'll still actually be in power by 2030 when this project is meant to be delivered. So there's a big question mark as to whether marketing or seeing this project as a special project of the Crown Prince will actually hinder the way that it develops in the future, or if it ever gets less support within the country.
And I think also it's worth pointing out that something that it feels like hasn't been reported on much in relation to this news story, except for the Wall Street Journal, which has done some incredible reporting on it, is that as well as all the kind of human rights issues associated with the project, there's also been a big issue with the forceful relocation of local people in the area, specifically members of a particular tribe. And residents and activists told the Wall Street Journal that police have been arresting local members of this tribe because they wouldn't sign relocation documents, and that other people have been detained for protesting the loss of what they consider to be ancestral lands. And details about compensation and resettlement assistance for these displaced people hasn't been revealed, and there's still a lot of question marks over that too. So I think it's definitely worth mentioning that.
I saw a quote from Mohammed bin Salman, who was reported to have said, "I want this to be my pyramids." You know, is this, Abdul, just a vanity project?
This is an awesome project on paper. I think, it looks really good. But again, Saudi doesn't have a great record they have kind of a mixed record of delivering and not delivering. They built a Formula One track in a couple of months, but then the tallest tower in Saudi Arabia, and it was going to be the tallest tower in the world, the Tower of Jeddah. The construction was halted in 2018 because of the political situation that was taking place in Saudi Arabia, and after completing 1/3 of the tower, and the tower is still there. If you visit Jeddah, you will see it, but it's been halted. The work has been halted since 2018. So is this going to be the thing that is going to deliver? We don't know. As Mariana said, 8 years, they're going to go fast. 2 years of COVID, this is the third year, went really fast. So we'll see how these 8 years will go. Hopefully nothing like COVID.
Yeah. I mean, it's the project itself is being reported, at least in the West, as being, like, depending on the publication, either a utopia or a very dystopian vision. Either way, Mariana, is this the future?
I would answer that if my crystal ball was working. It's unfortunately out of batteries, but I also feel like some of the people that were commenting on it, and it was such a simple question as to whether this high design approach actually ignores the desire to just go outside, and whether all the things that they are implementing within this high-tech dystopian or utopian city, some of the elements could have been applied onto existing cities and tackle some more traditional or typical challenges, as opposed to this idea of like this clean slate to begin with. And it's very hard to imagine, again, to go back to the point on social fabric, that the people that are going to be part of it are actually, unless their minds are going to be cleared as well, they're going to be part of this clean state approach, and how that would work indeed. So what else is necessary to actually make an utopian project work besides the technology? As Abdul was saying, Saudi Arabia certainly has the money, but what else does it take really is something that's not really part of all the marketing material so far.
Would any of you like to live in it?
Definitely, 100%, absolutely, yes. Please take me there. I've started looking for job applications and stuff. Just take me there, please.
I can't see myself moving here. I think it feels like my nightmare. The idea of it being this kind of microclimate with no seasons really freaks me out. I spent some time in Singapore, and it doesn't really have seasons. There aren't really seasons there. Every day is more or less the same. I found that really eerie. So I think it sounds like my worst nightmare, to be honest.
Okay, Mariana, I'm making a mirrored beeline for you next after this. So, Mariana, what do you think this week should be remembered for?
This week should be remembered by how the EU turned to an unlikely bastion of hope.
The country is one of the continent's biggest suppliers of liquefied natural gas and has offered to up supplies to Europe to plug any supply gap as the region weans itself off Russian energy.
Georgia Calvin-Smith reporting for France 24 back in April. Mariana, where's she talking about?
So she's talking about Nigeria and the EU's efforts to diversify its gas supplies. So I was reading just this week that the EU delegation to Nigeria went on a 2-day fact-finding mission where they spoke with several key government and stakeholders in the energy sector. And specifically from the press conference that they held afterwards, they talked about EU's ambition to collaborate with the Nigerian government on its energy transition.
Yes, gas supply and oil supply, for that matter, has been a big conversation since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. Could this idea of involving Nigeria, could this be a viable long-term solution?
Again, a great question for which I don't have my crystal ball for, but I think there are some positive or there's some potential that we can talk about. So currently, the EU already imports 14% of its liquefied natural gas from Nigeria's state oil producer. Nigeria is aiming to reopen its Trans-Niger pipeline, which has been closed or left at a 60% capacity, one of its terminals in specific, after a wave of theft and vandalism. And so the idea was from the press conference that the EU, with increased collaboration, but also a package of investments, could help boost Nigeria's capacity to 80% as opposed to the 60% that it's at right now. And another one of the developments more recently has been an area of agreement in terms of their future collaboration, where they're going to be looking at the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, which is, as a project, is considered the world's longest offshore pipeline and is expected to transport gas from Nigeria through Morocco and then into Europe.
Kate, Mariana was talking there about the problem within Nigeria of not just vandalism, but also theft of oil and gas supplies. Can you tell us a bit about what's been going on and whether this makes Nigeria look like not the safest of options for supplying these natural resources to Europe?
Yeah, crude oil theft is a massive problem in Nigeria. According to Reuters, the country loses millions of barrels of crude oil every single year because of theft and vandalism, which includes the tapping of crude oil from a maze of different pipelines. In fact, the country lost 1 billion in revenue during the first quarter of this year as a result of crude oil theft, according to Nigeria's petrol regulator. And the problem is so bad that some operators have even had to declare force majeure, as over 91% of crude is being lost in certain pipelines. The president has pledged to ensure that oil theft is stopped, and he set up dedicated courts to try and combat the problem, but it's still a massive issue, and it continues to be.
I mean, 91%, that is a massive deficit of the oil that's being brought out of the ground and then not making it to its target destination. Abdul, what can be done to prevent this?
Well, first of all, security. To be honest with you, Arion, I cannot really keep up with the number of terrorist organizations and their names. There have been a number of terrorist attacks. One of them, as we all know, in 2013, in Al Aminas in Algeria in 2013, where an Al-Qaeda affiliated group took a number of expat hostages. 39 people were killed, and then around 700 people were freed, of course, over a 4-day period in Algeria. And that was near a gas facility. And then we have the spokesperson of a militant group, a terrorist group called Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta. And the spokesman said that, to quote, any money put into the project will go down the drain if the issue around people is not resolved. And the issue around people here is that, all this money, all the exportation of gas is making a lot of money for these countries. So, but not investing in the local communities will harm these local communities, and they will not get anything out of it. So if these countries do not invest in the local communities, it's going to be a problem. And it is a problem because if you look at the index of corruption around the world, Nigeria is in the 154th place, Niger is in the 124th, and Algeria is in the 117th place out of 180. So there's a lot of work to be done in here around supporting local people and building a safe and secure infrastructure that the governments or the European Union can work with.
When I was reading about this news and this developments, there's so much about EU's priorities, the war in Ukraine, Russia weaponizing its gas supplies, but there's very little of a Nigerian perspective on whether this would be a welcome development. What are their thoughts on it? The debate seems to be very much one-sided, and I think that speaks to what Abdul was raising.
Oh, I think that's a really important question. You know, the crisis for Europe is now, and if the infrastructure isn't necessarily in place, you know, is Nigeria in a position, Kate, to be able to start supplying gas at volume to Europe and in the immediate term?
I suppose it depends on whether Nigeria is going to be able to deal with this huge problem of theft, and lots of money needs to be spent on pipeline security and maintaining the pipelines, which obviously means less money on profit. And questions, I suppose, will be asked about whether that's something that the EU will support with. Will money be provided to help ensure the security of the pipes? And it's also worth raising that there are environmental consequences of this crude oil theft, as well as there being consequences for Nigeria's economy. One of the methods that these oil thieves use when attempting to steal directly from the pipelines is to cause explosions, and one of the kind of safer places for them in terms of not being caught to do this is in areas where there are rivers and swamps and places where they can kind of do their work undetected. And that means when they cause these explosions, oil runs directly into natural environment, and it can cause huge danger, not just for the people who are actually carrying out the theft, because it's an extremely dangerous thing to do, but for those natural environments as well. So it really is a problem that's bigger than just the economy.
I think that point that it's worth considering this question from different perspectives, say Nigeria's, as you were saying, Mariana, but also Russia's, is really important. You know, Abdul, can Russia afford to stop delivering gas to Europe? I know they've been tinkering with the amount of gas they're delivering at the moment, but how can Putin continue to fund his war if he doesn't have the income coming from the fossil fuels that he's been continuing to sell to Europe? Or will he just try to find another buyer?
Well, Russia has a number of options in order to control Europe. Well, one of them is stopping not stopping its gas supply, but the other one is forcing, or not forcing, like pressuring the African countries to not supply the EU. As we know, the Wagner Group, which is a paramilitary Russian company that is linked to the Kremlin, supplies a number of African governments with paid militia that they do their work for them. The Lavrov Secretary of State, or the Foreign Secretary, was in Africa and visited 4 countries just this week in order to put pressure on a number of countries to really not help supply the EU with gas or any energy. So Russia has a lot of influence in Africa. And the problem is, EU knows this, and it's been for a long time. We've seen that in Libya with the Wagner Group and the BBC report on it, and we see it in other countries. But again, is this the time for the EU to act on the gas and natural resources? The European Union wants to cut its emission by 55% by 2030. So is it now going to invest in making new routes for gas and for petrol? When it wants to use a clear energy? I'm not really sure.
Mariana, what's next for this story? What's the repercussion for all our lives?
I mean, the shortest term development is that they're having further talks in August. So I think the same people that went on this EU delegation to Nigeria are sort of picking up this conversation. So it's very much an ongoing thing. It sounds like both sides are incredibly interested in making this work one way or another, despite some of the problems that we've just heard now. But also, there are other wider consequences of the whole gas supply issue for Europe, in that it's ramping up the global prices for gas. And I think, I don't remember now who said it, but there is I think it might have been Bloomberg, that there is a 1 in 4 chance of Germany slipping into a recession as a result of all these prices. And especially, I think, although for the UK, although we don't rely on that much Russian gas specifically, it's all these global cumulative effects. There are the restrictions on Europe that will have effects on the household bills and energy, fuel, diesel, petrol prices who have soared recently.
Okay, Kate, you're up next after this. Okay, Kate, you're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Was this the week we learned that the gender fitness gap is real?
My name's Anissa. I'm a photographer. Most freelancers, our work really suffered. If in your head you've got lots of things telling you, oh my God, you've got no work, and how are you going to build back your business, that's quite scary. But it was good. I think the exercise really kept me on top. I used to go to the gym a few times a week. I was missing seeing my friends and exercising, but it was really hard to get in the routine with the children. So one of my old PTs offered out to do something on Zoom, and they gave me different options, one to do it with the kids and one to do it with just women, and that was brilliant. I did it with the boys, so we'd be in the dining room together, and it was just like a really lovely thing. I needed it. I actually needed it.
Anessa's story from the This Girl Can campaign. Kate, what's the story here?
So this week marked the publication of a study that was carried out by a polling company called Census Wide on behalf of the gym chain Nuffield Health. And it found that almost half of women in the UK have done no vigorous exercise in the past 12 months, compared with just over a third of men. The gyms surveyed 8,000 adults across the UK, and it found that 38% of women said they'd got out of the habit of exercising during lockdown. 11% said they got into good exercise habits but struggled to maintain them, and 14% said they'd given up on exercising completely. And as mentioned, almost half, so 47% of respondents said they'd failed to do any vigorous exercise, which is defined by the NHS as being things like running, swimming, aerobics or gymnastics, and that was in the past year.
So what's really driving this reduction in exercise, and what accounts for the difference between men and women?
That's a really interesting question. So in terms of the factors that have driven those responses, well, there were various reasons given by the women who were part of the survey. So 67% of them said it was to do with a lack of motivation, 55% said a lack of time was the main cause, and a third said that they didn't know how to get started. Also, and I found this really interesting, as many as 40% of women cited embarrassment as being a major barrier to exercise, and that was compared with just 29% of men. And I suppose in answer to your second part of your question, this survey that has drawn a lot of interest among mainly women on social media who've really pointed out reasons that may have contributed to this difference between men and women. And a lot of that is to do with gender inequality and the fact that women still take on the bulk of household chores and childcare duties. And that just really leaves a complete lack of time to do things like exercising. And there was a quote in the Daily Mail's You magazine, which I really liked, which said, I wonder, it was talking about how men spend more time exercising than women. And it said, I wonder where they get that time from. Perhaps it's because on average, men spend 70 minutes less time than women doing household chores per day, or the 8.5 hours a week they save on childcare versus women.
Yeah, it is staggering the extent to which that has been the story, at least in the commentary that you see across social media and across the media in general. But Abdul, how much is the childcare crisis in the UK responsible for what's going on here?
Well, I'm not really sure about how much of the childcare is responsible for this. Of course, the cost of living contributes to this. Everything's getting more expensive. But I'm not sure if I don't remember reading when I was checking this study. I'm not really sure if I saw that the people who took this, who participated in this study are only married or have children or single moms. It says that it's adults around the country, 8,000 adults. So it doesn't really say that these people are parents. So I'm not really sure if it's only about having children, not being able to, to do any exercise because you have children or not. So This is a question for Kate as well. Does it say anywhere?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's actually what a lot of responses to the commentary on social media have been about. And people have pointed out that it's more talking about things like a lack of motivation than about there being a lack of time. And that a lot of people have kind of assumed or like taken from the survey that that's what it's about, when actually that hasn't been what people have said. And I think actually probably the main motivation outlined in the survey is just the difference people are feeling before the pandemic to now in terms of their motivation to exercise. And a lot of women in the study actually cited lockdown as just being a catalyst for giving up sports and physical hobbies. And it's not surprising if you think about how much lockdown changed the way that we work and the way that we socialize. I suppose it makes sense that it would have changed the way that we exercise as well.
Mariana, has your exercise routine been changed by the pandemic or not so much?
I feel incredibly seen right now, and also when I was looking at this report, as I was an avid attendant to my gym, and I had always been participating in these group classes at least 2 to 3 times a week, and I feel like after the pandemic, it's been much harder to get back onto that. And I do not have kids, so I don't the whole childcare debate really doesn't apply to me, so it doesn't really explain this sort of change in the post-pandemic world. But I found really interesting that much like me, there was this survey in 2020 within the UK that showed that at least 76% of attendees of group classes are women. And so I found that from at least my area, the gyms around me, it's more that the weight training facilities have opened up before the classes have been implemented again. And this idea of being in big groups, in small rooms, it's something that maybe people are not as comfortable with anymore, and maybe affecting the numbers of the survey they were talking about.
There were a lot of downsides to the pandemic, obviously, but one of the upsides was meant to be that it was going to be able to free up more of our time. So we had less commuting, for example, to get to offices and back. Why have we not been able to use that time, Abdul, to put more exercise in our lives?
Well, because you need to be motivated in order to put exercise. And what motivates you? If you're already, I don't know, I'm just talking from personal experience here, no empirical data whatsoever, which is, against what I believe in as academic. If you're single and you're putting yourself in the dating pool, of course you're going to look after yourself. Exercise, not exercise, and that's from my friends. Whether women or men. Again, this is not based on any empirical data, but also social media works. There's a lot of social media pressure on it. A lot of agencies or charities should support everyone. For example, there was a new campaign in Spain. It says all bodies are beach ready. And this is in order to encourage specifically women to go to the beach, because a lot of them, as Kate said, talked about social pressure and embarrassment. And this was a very good campaign and very inclusive, and put lots of different body shapes into this campaign, and says like everyone is beach ready, which is good in order to motivate everyone. I remember in 2015, there was an advertisement that was banned later in England, which says, "Are you beach ready?" And there was a very unrealistic, I think, standards for people or to look like, the figure that was put in there. But why did we not use this time to exercise? I think because we are speaking from personal experience, because we're lazy. I don't know. And because British Bake Off is really good to watch during lockdown.
That definitely has to be part of the story. Mariana?
No, I have 2 points to make. The first is that during the pandemic, I bought a stand mixer and got into baking. So that's absolutely something that may be speaking to the points that you're raising. But also to Abdul's point about motivation and to soothe Abdul's academic soul, there was this 2014 study that looked at how women reported to exercise for weight loss and toning, and men were more often seen exercising for enjoyment. And so I feel like that goes a long way to explain this physical exercise gender gap that we're seeing in the survey.
Okay, the idea of governmental involvement, like we've seen in Spain, what Abdul was talking about a campaign to try and encourage people to go to the beach. I mean, is a campaign what's necessary here to try to get people back into exercise?
It's a good question, and it's a hard one to answer. I mean, that I've seen people have been calling on the government to subsidise gym membership. I'm can't see that happening necessarily. I know that some companies do that, but I can't really imagine that being a government priority right now. Although, if you think about the strain that our NHS is under and the fact that we're having this crisis at the moment in terms of NHS waiting lists, if we're thinking long term, actually investing in fitness and people's fitness and people exercising now probably will end up paying off at a later date. But that would involve thinking in a very long term way, which governments don't tend to do.
I mean, Abdul, if the story is that people are simply becoming happier with the amount of exercise they're doing, then is it a problem, or is doing more exercise these days simply necessary because, as opposed to the slightly more distant past, we just live more sedentary lives than we used to?
I think exercise now after the pandemic is really essential. Research shows that it helps you with mental health illness and issues. And again, talking from personal experience, when I first moved to the UK from Syria, exercising was really great for me. Because when you exercise, when you're in the gym, whether you're running or you're swimming, you put your mind to rest, and then you feel better about yourself. So exercising now is really important. If we look at Hong Kong, for example, here, as Kate mentioned, there are a number of, there were calls for gym subscription to be subsidized. But here in Hong Kong, for example, there are so many public pools you can swim for free. There are a number of free gyms where you can go for free. There are a number of exercising and leisure activities like tennis courts, basketball courts, where you can go and play for free. So these are things that can help. And yes, we should definitely do more exercise if we want really, to take care of our mental health, which has been really affected badly by COVID.
Free gyms, Kate, is that the solution?
I think bringing free gyms to the UK would definitely help address part of this problem. But clearly there are bigger questions about why fewer women are exercising than men that need to be addressed, specifically things like why women feel embarrassed, and also concerns that women might feel about their safety, for example, when going for a run.
For a very, very final point on women feeling unsafe running outside, get a big dog. It makes me feel incredibly safe when I go out on daily walks. Always works. And it even wears a muzzle for extra intimidation factor.
Well, that's probably enough of a workout from all of us this week. My thanks to Kate, Abdul, and Mariana for their stories. And you can follow this show for free and get every episode as soon as it's released by searching for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts and tapping follow. Remember too to check out our sister show from the week, The Overview. I've been Arion McNicoll. Our music is by Tom Morby. The producer, Sophie King at Rethink Audio. Olly will be back next week, so until next time, goodbye.